The phone rang just after 6 p.m., right when the fog started sliding down Twin Peaks, and the city outside my office turned into a slow, gray whisper. I remember that moment too well. I was staring at the monitor, rereading a bug report for the third time, something about user presence flickering in private channels, and trying to decide whether to grab another coffee or just give up for the day. Then came the call. Not just any call, the call, the one I still hear in my head, sometimes in the middle of the night, not for what was said, but for what it meant, for what it changed, and what it took. I picked up without thinking, still typing, still inside the code. A smooth voice, too smooth, said, "Daniel Reed, this is Monica Lefebvre, Prometheus Ventures. We've reviewed PulseOne's numbers, and we'd like to make a serious offer." I stopped typing, just stopped. The screen faded into the background. The office around me, the whiteboard, the pizza box, the overwatered plant in the corner, disappeared into static. And for a second, a stupid, weightless second, I thought maybe it was a prank. Monica kept talking, polished, deliberate, like someone who's closed a dozen deals that week and had no time for small talk. She dropped the number quickly like a scalpel. 80 million, full acquisition, clean terms, 2 days to decide. And just like that, the world tilted. I didn't say anything. Just stood there, staring through the glass wall at the darkening skyline of San Francisco. Market Street flickering below, like some old digital grid, alive and fragile all at once. 80 million. She kept going, listing details, logistics, NDAs, liquidity, all the usual stuff. But I'd already stopped listening, because in that moment I felt it, a soundless, invisible snap, like something inside me quietly tore. I put her on speaker, let her voice fill the room like artificial light, and I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of it all press into my chest. 80 million. I thought I'd feel triumph. I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I felt like I was about to throw up. And here's the thing, no one tells you, no one wants to tell you. When you build something from scratch, when you pour years of your life into an idea, an obsession, a stupid little product that maybe 5,000 teams actually use, and most of them don't even pay yet. When you build that with your bare hands, selling it isn't a celebration, it's a funeral. I stood up, walked to the window, pressed my hand to the cold glass, and looked down at the city I thought I understood. The one I came to at 23 with a laptop, a credit card, and no plan B. The offer was real, the money was real, and I didn't know what the hell I was supposed to feel. 2 days. I turned the speaker off. Silence came back like a cold wind. I sat back down, and that's when I whispered it to myself. Not as a thought, but as something truer than logic. I didn't know it back then, but that was the last moment I still believed I had time, because everything that came after didn't leave space for anything but after. There was a song playing in the car that evening. I don't remember the name, just the rhythm, that slow, pulsing kind of beat that makes you feel like you're stuck between gears. Not quite driving, not quite stopping. I sat there for a long time outside the house, engine running, headlights cutting through the early fog like they were searching for something I couldn't name. Inside, the lights were on. I could see Julia through the kitchen window, moving slowly, her hair pulled back the way she always did when she was thinking about money. She was talking on the phone, probably her sister, one hand on her hip, the other holding a glass of wine. She didn't know yet. I hadn't told her, not about the offer, not about Monica, not about the $80 million that were suddenly breathing down my neck like a ghost made of gold. I leaned back, eyes closed, and thought, what if I'm giving away the only thing that made me who I am? Because it wasn't just a product. It wasn't just some collaborative dashboard or chat channels or integrations with calendar APIs. PulseOne was everything. It was notebooks filled with wireframes. It was ramen on the floor of a co-working space. It was missed birthdays, panic attacks, The stupid argument I had with Julia when I mortgaged half our savings to cover server costs and told her, I swear we're close. Close to what, Daniel? I used to think I was building something elegant, something clean. A place where teams could actually think together. No ads, no bloat, just signal. But now I wasn't even sure I was building it anymore, or if it had started building me. When I finally walked in, Julia looked at me with that look, the one she saved for late nights and bad news. You're pale, she said. Did something happen? I kissed her cheek, poured myself a drink and said, too casually, Prometheus Ventures made an offer. She didn't move, didn't blink. Then slowly she put the glass down. How much? I told her. Silence. She turned away, ran water over her hands, said nothing for a while. Just the sound of the faucet. Then, we should talk to a lawyer. That was her answer. Not, are you serious? Not, is this what you want? Just a simple sentence, cold, sharp, unmistakable. And I got it. I did. Julia had been patient, more than patient. She'd watched me run myself into the ground for 4 years, watch me lose weight, lose sleep, lose moments. And now there was a number, a lifeline, something tangible. She wanted peace. She wanted security. She wanted the house in Napa we used to talk about on tired Sunday mornings. Before PulseOne, before the burn rate, before my mother got sick. And God, my mother. The hospital bills had become a second startup I wasn't ready to run. She'd had good days lately. The new treatment was helping. But every time I heard the phone ring, some small part of me braced for the last one. I stayed up that night in the study, laptop open, code editor blinking, staring at a single line for over an hour. A function I knew by heart, one I'd written in the early days, when PulseOne was just a name scribbled on a napkin in a shared Google Doc. Then I opened the team chat. Everyone was offline, except one. Larry. I sent him a message. You up? Typing. Then, of course. Can't sleep. You heard from Monica, right? I called him. Larry sounded wired, excited, like a man who just saw daylight after being trapped in a basement for years. She wants to close fast, he said. Daniel, this is it. This is the window. You know what happens when the market turns? And it will turn. Look at the housing data. Look at lending rates. There's a storm coming, man. I know, I said, but I didn't. Not really. You built something brilliant, Larry continued, but you're killing yourself chasing the last 10%. I'm telling you, we already won. I stared at the bookshelf in front of me, the one with the innovator's dilemma, Outliers, Steve Jobs, the biography. All the books that taught me to hold the line, to fight, to finish. But what if it's not finished? I said softly. Larry went quiet. You always said we had to ship when it's right, I said. What if this isn't right yet? Silence again. Then it'll never be. You know that. This thing will never feel done to you. And you know what? That's fine. That's your gift. But don't let it be your curse. He paused, then said something I didn't forget. You're not betraying your vision, Daniel. You're making sure someone else doesn't bury it. We hung up around 2 a.m. I sat there long after the screen dimmed. The fog had thickened, pressed itself against the window like it was listening. And in that quiet, I let myself wonder, just for a moment, what it would feel like to let go, to stop bleeding for an idea, to be just a man again, not a founder. Not a CEO, just Daniel Reed. But right before I turned off the lights, I whispered, half asleep, half afraid, what if I'm not supposed to be anyone else but this? And I didn't sleep at all that night. The clock blinked 11:47 p.m. when I finally hit send. That single click, just one small action, would echo louder in my mind than anything I'd ever done before. Everything before this moment felt like a distant dream. Everything after, well, I didn't know if there would be an after. The papers were signed. The deal was done. Monica from Prometheus Ventures was already congratulating me. her voice smooth and businesslike, like a melody I'd heard too many times. There were no cheers, no big speeches, just a string of legal jargon and confirmation numbers, and the same hollow thank you I'd been repeating for days, as if I could trick myself into believing I was actually proud of this. $80 million. It felt wrong. The moment it was over, I could taste it in my mouth. The metallic aftertaste of regret. I sat back in my chair, staring at the now empty office. The space that had once been filled with late nights, hurried ideas, stacks of notes, half-empty coffee cups. Julia was asleep upstairs. The house was quiet. For a second, I almost wanted to wake her up and tell her that everything was going to be fine. But it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. I had made a decision that no amount of money could make right. I walked out into the hallway, then into the dark of the office. It was midnight now, the air cool and still. There was something unsettling about walking through a space that had been so full of life, only to find it empty now. My footsteps echoed off the walls, the sound of my shoes on the cold floor louder than it should have been. I walked past the whiteboard, still covered with my scribbles from the last sprint. The numbers that meant everything to us back then, now just numbers. I stopped in front of the desk. The chair I used to sit in felt cold, untouched, waiting. The deal was done, and yet I felt like I was still holding on to something that wasn't even there anymore. I ran my fingers over the old laptop sitting on the desk. I hadn't touched it in weeks, but I did just now. I slid it open and saw the startup's dashboard on the screen, the same one I had spent sleepless nights tweaking and refining. The product that I built. I closed the laptop and just stared at it. A few moments later, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I didn't check it. There was no need. I knew who it would be. Larry. Maybe he'd already called. Maybe he was celebrating. His side of the deal, the one that had been planned all along. A smooth exit, clean, simple. But I wasn't celebrating. I hadn't even moved the money to my personal account yet. I didn't even know if I wanted to. 80 million. But I still felt empty. I remember the quiet of that night. It wasn't just the silence of the office. It was the silence of a part of me that I had just buried. The same part that had driven me to build PulseOne. The part that believed in the idea of something bigger than just profit. I stood there for a long time watching the city through the window. The lights of San Francisco twinkled in the distance, but it felt so far away, so distant. It wasn't the end, but it sure as hell wasn't a beginning. And as I turned off the lights and walked out of the office for the last time, I realized I had just traded the very thing that had made me who I was. I thought I was leaving behind failure, but what I was really leaving behind was myself. 6 months. 6 months since I clicked send and sold everything I believed in. 6 months since I let go of PulseOne, that thing I thought would define me forever. And what had I done with that time? I sat on a terrace in Tuscany, staring out at the vineyards. The sun was setting, bleeding red and gold into the hills. It was supposed to be peaceful, supposed to be my time to relax, to breathe, to escape, to think. But all I could think about was them, the people who'd taken what I built and turned it into something that I was no longer part of. I should have been happy. I should have been grateful for the money, for the security, for the life Julia and I were supposed to have now. No more stress, no more constant chasing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone horribly wrong, something that money could never fix. I reached for my phone, checking the notifications that had piled up in the last hour. News from the tech world, the usual stuff, IPOs, mergers, rumors. And then I saw it. PulseOne was now the core of Orbit, a new platform that has already reached a valuation of $9 billion, leading the next wave of team collaboration tools. My stomach twisted. I felt the blood drain from my face as I read the headline over and over again, like I could somehow will the words to make sense. PulseOne, my product, my dream, had become the heartbeat of a new empire. Only it wasn't my empire. It was theirs. $9 billion. And I wasn't part of it. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the stone terrace as I walked back into the villa. I needed to move, to do something, but nothing felt real. Nothing felt like it mattered. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. I opened the article, skimmed through it again, and there it was. The feature I'd always dreamed of but never finished. Smart workspaces, AI-powered collaboration, real-time data integration. All the things I wanted PulseOne to be, but couldn't bring myself to do. The version they built, it was everything I couldn't dare to build. It was everything I wasn't willing to compromise on. It was the product I could have had if I had just pushed harder, believed more, stayed up one more night. But I didn't, and now someone else was holding the keys to that future, to my future. I ran my fingers through my hair, then slammed the laptop shut. The walls felt like they were closing in. I tried to calm myself, tried to breathe, to remind myself it didn't matter. It was just business, right? I sold. They bought. That's how it worked. But I couldn't convince myself. It did matter. I wasn't angry at the people who had bought PulseOne. I wasn't angry at Larry. I wasn't even angry at Monica for pushing me to sell so fast. I was angry at myself, for selling out, for walking away when I should have kept fighting, for abandoning the idea of what PulseOne could have been, what it should have been. They finished the version I never dared to start, I muttered, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. I closed my eyes and leaned back in the chair. The room seemed to spin, the shadows of the past 6 months twisting around me like a slow-moving storm. I thought I had left it all behind, thought I could live this new life. But now in the quiet of Tuscany, I realized I'd never escape what I had given up, what I had walked away from, and it was eating at me, bit by bit. Maybe it wasn't the money I wanted. Maybe it wasn't the freedom. It was the thing I built, the thing I left to someone else. I didn't know where to go after Tuscany. After everything that had happened, after the deal, after the shock of watching my creation become someone else's empire, I thought maybe a change of scenery would help. Maybe it would clear my head. Maybe I could find the spark again, somewhere, anywhere. I bought a house by the ocean, a little cabin in Big Sur, tucked away from everything, from everyone. It was beautiful, the kind of place you see in postcards, waves crashing against jagged rocks, the scent of salt in the air, the constant hum of the ocean wind. I told myself I was going to relax, that I needed time, to breathe, to recalibrate. But the house didn't change anything. I tried. God knows I tried. I spent my mornings pacing the beach, looking for something that might make sense. I came back in the afternoons, opened my laptop, sat down with notebooks full of half-baked ideas, things that didn't even make sense to me anymore. I emailed former mentors, hoping they'd help me find a new direction, a new purpose. I met with investors, threw out concepts for new products, new services, new whatever. Nothing worked. Nothing felt right. I had the money. I had the time. I had the freedom. So why didn't it feel like I was building anything worth building? I spent more nights awake than I could count, staring at the ceiling. The dark had become my only companion. Julia, too, had started sleeping on the couch more often. I could hear her soft breathing from the other room, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the sound of the click. That single moment I sold PulseOne, when I gave away something that was so much more than just a product. I sold a product, but I gave away the part of me that made sense. I could hear it echo in my mind, every night, every minute, every second. I started drinking more, just a little, just enough to dull the ache. But it wasn't enough. Nothing was. I couldn't get away from it. I couldn't escape that emptiness. The ocean, it felt too big, too vast, like it was swallowing me whole. Every wave that crashed against the rocks seemed like a reminder that I was small, that I had built something that didn't matter, that no matter what I did now, the thing I had poured my soul into was already gone. And then, the emails, the news, the stories, the headlines, Orbit, that name, it never left my inbox. Another $1 million round of funding, Another partnership, another shiny new feature, the one I had wanted for PulseOne, the one I had always thought of, but never got to execute. I couldn't ignore it. Every time I saw it, I felt a sharp pain deep in my chest. I tried calling Larry once, but when he answered, all he could talk about was how great everything was going, how lucky I was to have sold, to be free. His words were empty to me now, and the loneliness I felt, that sense of utter disconnect, began to swallow me. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Was I just the guy who built PulseOne? Was I just the guy who sold it? What was I without it? I couldn't get past it. Every time I thought I was moving forward, I realized I was still stuck in the same place, the same story, same regret. Julia tried to reach me. She said things like, "You'll figure it out. This is just a phase." But she didn't know. She didn't understand that it wasn't just a phase. It was a part of me that I had lost. And no amount of money, no new house, no ocean view was going to bring it back. I thought I had walked away from my mistakes. I thought I had walked away from the failure. But now, I realized I wasn't walking away from anything. I was running from myself, running from the person I thought I could have been. I used to think success was the end goal. I used to think it was all about reaching that finish line. But now I knew success wasn't the goal. It was the beginning of something else, something I couldn't see, couldn't touch, couldn't even imagine without that part of me still hanging on to PulseOne. Without it, I didn't know what to do. So I kept trying, I kept pushing, I kept searching. But the thing was, I wasn't searching for a new idea. I was searching for the man I had left behind. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find him. The doorbell rang early that morning, a sharp sound cutting through the fog in the house. I wasn't expecting anyone. No meetings, no new investments, no mentors this time. It was just me, still waking up on the couch, the sun barely peeking over the cliffs outside. The fog hadn't even lifted yet. I pulled myself up slowly, my body still stiff from the restless nights. I hadn't even gotten dressed yet. When I opened the door, there he was. Larry. He looked almost the same. A little older maybe, a little more worn, but still with that same unfiltered energy that had always driven him. It was the energy that drove PulseOne, the energy that made it happen, and I hated it. He stood there for a moment, looking like he didn't know what to say. I didn't know either. "Hey man," Larry finally said. His voice was raw, like he'd been talking nonstop for days. I didn't invite him in. Instead, I stood in the doorway, my eyes scanning his face, looking for some sign of the guy I used to know. The guy who had fought alongside me, who'd spent countless hours in those same empty office spaces, talking about the future that I had just sold. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stepped aside and let him in, not sure why I was doing it, or if I even wanted him there. We stood in the living room for a long moment, just staring at each other, unsure how to start. I didn't feel the usual rush of anger, but I couldn't hide the disappointment. "You want a drink?" I asked, almost without thinking. "Whiskey? Wine?" Larry shook his head. "Let's just talk, man." We sat down in silence, the ocean crashing in the distance. The only sound between us was the hum of the refrigerator. Larry looked at me, waiting for me to say something, but it was hard to find the words. For so long, I had seen him as a partner, as someone who understood, but now it felt like he was from another world. "I don't get it, Larry," I said, the words finally spilling out. "I don't get how you could just walk away. You knew what PulseOne was supposed to be. You knew how important it was." Larry leaned back, his gaze unfazed. His tone was calm, almost resigned. "We did what we could, Daniel," he said slowly. "We built something. But we weren't going to change the world with what we had. You know that. You wanted perfection. I wanted a life, a future." His words hit me like a slap. "I wanted perfection?" I echoed, almost laughing. "I wanted a product that works. I wanted something that meant something." Larry's eyes softened. "I know, man. I know. But perfect doesn't exist. Not in this game. Look at what happened when we tried to make it perfect. We almost ran the company into the ground. We burned through cash, we lost focus. You couldn't see it, but I could. We had to sell. We had to move on. I swallowed hard, the words twisting in my throat. And you were okay with it? You were okay with selling out? Larry looked at me, his gaze sharp. It's not selling out, Daniel. It's survival. You might have had the luxury of holding on to an ideal, but I didn't. I was tired of scraping by, tired of watching the company drown in its own weight. I needed to make a choice, and I chose the future. I chose to keep going. The words hit harder than I expected. He wasn't wrong. I knew that, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. I'd built PulseOne with a vision, a dream of what could be, and Larry had seen it, but he saw something different. He had always seen the practicality of it all. He didn't see the vision. He saw the business. It wasn't until that moment that I realized how different we had been all along. I had been so wrapped up in the ideal. He had been looking for something real, something tangible, something that would work. I wasn't trying to sell out, Larry, I said quietly. I just didn't want to be another guy who gave up. I didn't want to be a failure. Larry's face softened, but there was still something there. Something in his eyes that told me he wasn't going to apologize. He was who he was. He had made his choice, and he had moved on. I didn't want to be a failure either, Daniel, he said, his voice quiet now. But you've got to understand, I was running out of time. I was running out of hope. I couldn't keep chasing an idea that wasn't real, that wasn't working. His words stung. They felt like a rejection of everything I had believed in, but I couldn't escape the truth in them. I looked at him for a long time. The anger was still there, but something else had started to creep in. Something darker, something more painful. I felt like I was looking at a version of myself that had given up. A version that had accepted the price of the world I'd built. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I wasn't just angry at Larry. I was angry at myself for holding on too long, for letting the dream consume me, for forgetting that sometimes survival meant letting go. I didn't know what to say after that. Larry didn't either. We both just sat there in silence. Two men who had once shared a vision, now standing at the crossroads of everything we'd built. It was time to make a choice, to hate or to let go. I didn't expect to meet them. Not like this, at least. It was a coffee shop in the Mission District, tucked between a record store and a dive bar. The kind of place you'd never look twice at unless you were looking for something you couldn't name. The kind of place where you could hear the hum of life, the unfiltered, raw energy of young people chasing something bigger than themselves, even if they didn't know what that something was yet. I had been sitting alone, my back against the wall, trying to focus on a notebook full of half-formed ideas, trying to find some spark again, some reason to keep going. And then they walked in, two young guys and a woman, no older than their mid-20s. They were talking animatedly, like they had just discovered the secret to everything. Their energy was loud, almost naive, but in a way that didn't feel like desperation. It felt like hope, real, unfiltered hope. And for the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me, a tiny flickering ember of something that resembled purpose. They sat down at the table next to mine, their laptops open, scribbling down ideas, debating over code, discussing some new project they were working on. Their conversation was scattered but passionate, filled with terms I didn't quite recognize, but that sounded real, alive. I heard snippets of their conversation. "We don't want venture capital," one of them said. "We don't want to sell out. We just want to build something people actually use." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. It was like hearing my younger self speaking, the self I had left behind, the self who had believed in something pure, something real. I don't know why I spoke up. Maybe I was tired of sitting in silence, tired of being a ghost in my own life. Or maybe it was the way they spoke, like they hadn't learned the hard lessons yet, like they still believed in the magic of creating something for the right reasons. "You guys are building something?" I asked, my voice sounding a little foreign to me. They looked at me, surprised but not defensive. The woman, her curly hair pulled back in a loose bun, was the first to respond. Yeah, we're trying to, but we're kind of stuck. We're figuring it out. But, we don't have funding yet, no investors, no big plans. It's just an idea right now. I nodded, unsure what to say. There was something in their voices that felt so different from everything I had experienced before. They weren't talking about scaling or exit strategies. They weren't looking at the numbers. They were talking about a project born from the desire to create. You're doing it for the right reasons, I said quietly, surprising myself. The woman smiled, almost relieved. You think so? Yeah, it's rare. People don't start projects like that anymore. They leaned in, curious now. What do you mean? I said, leaning back. I've seen it all. The hustle, the investments, the end goal, the money. But you guys, you've got something else. And that's what matters. Don't lose it. They looked at each other, exchanging silent glances. They had no idea who I was. They didn't know that I'd sold a company. They didn't know I had once been in their shoes, full of hope, full of ideas, but crushed by the weight of expectations. They didn't know I was someone who had let go of all that, someone who had let go of myself, and it felt good. In that moment, I wasn't someone's ex-CEO. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't someone who had let their vision slip through their fingers. I was just a guy who was talking to a group of people who still believed in something that I had once believed in too. They asked for advice, simple, honest questions. I told them what I knew, but I told them honestly. No sugarcoating, no fancy success stories, just the hard truth. I told them it wouldn't be easy, that there would be days when they would want to quit, that people would tell them to sell out, to take the easy road. And then I told them something I'd never told anyone before. Don't chase the money, don't chase the exit. Don't let anyone tell you what your company's supposed to be. Build it for the people who need it. Build it for the right reasons. If it works, it works. If not, at least you'll know you did it for the right reasons. They listened, all three of them. I could see it in their eyes. Something had clicked. Maybe it was the first time anyone had told them the truth. Maybe they had just been waiting for someone to say it out loud. But the way they looked at me, like I had just given them some ancient secret, it was all I needed. I wasn't some investor. I wasn't some washed-up founder telling them what not to do. I was a guy who had been where they were. I was a guy who had lost his way and had found it again, not through another startup or another deal, but through helping others find their own path. For the first time in months, I felt something that didn't come with a price tag. I felt connected. I felt real again. I wasn't building anything, but I was helping them build. And for some reason, that was enough. When I left the coffee shop that day, I didn't feel like I had the answers. But I felt like I was starting to understand something again. Something I had forgotten along the way. That it's not about the product. It's not about the exit. It's about creating something that matters. Something that doesn't need to be measured by the numbers. It's about the people. The ones who believe in something just as much as you do. It was just another evening. Another quiet night in the house by the ocean. Another glass of wine. Another restless attempt to fill the silence. I had started to get used to the quiet. It had become my companion, and for a while, it had been enough. But as time passed, something shifted. That familiar ache, the one that had been quiet for so long, started creeping back into my chest. I knew that feeling. It was the need to create, the need to build. But this time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. The phone rang. It was a name I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. I almost let it go to voicemail. But then, I didn't. Hello? Daniel? It was a voice I'd never heard before, but there was something in it that sounded oddly familiar. This is Sarah from Greenleaf Labs. We're a small team based out of Palo Alto, and we've been following your work. We think you'd be a perfect fit for what we're doing. We'd like to discuss something with you. My heart skipped a beat. 100 thoughts flooded my mind, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm listening, I said. Well, we've been working on a project in the AI space, Sarah continued. a tool that helps streamline the way remote teams collaborate. It's in the early stages, but we've got the foundation built, and we're looking for someone with your experience, your vision. We're wondering if you'd be interested in joining us as a co-founder. I blinked. The word co-founder hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't heard that word in a long time, not in relation to me, not since I walked away from PulseOne, and now someone else was offering me that title, offering me a chance to do it all over again. I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the familiar pulse of panic rising in my chest. I'm not sure. You're asking me to come on board as a co-founder after everything? I could almost hear Sarah smile through the phone. We know about PulseOne, Daniel. We've done our research, and we respect what you built, but we're not looking for you to recreate PulseOne. We're looking for someone who's been through it, someone who knows what works and what doesn't. We don't want to repeat the mistakes the industry's already made. We just want to create something that really makes a difference. Her words felt like they were hanging in the air. Really makes a difference. I'd heard that before, 1,000 times, and yet there was something about her voice, about her conviction, that made me stop. I thought about what I had just come from, what I had walked away from. I thought about the quiet moments of the past few months, the nights spent staring at the ocean, trying to convince myself I could live without building again. I thought about the loneliness, the emptiness that had followed me from that office in San Francisco. That same emptiness that I hadn't been able to escape. Could I do it again? Could I build something new, something real without falling back into the same cycle? Without getting caught up in the chase for money, for investors, for validation? I thought about Larry, about the way he had looked at me when he walked away from PulseOne. I thought about the advice I had given the young team in the coffee shop. To build for the right reasons, to create for the sake of creating, to not chase the exit. Could I do that again? Could I build something without losing myself in it? The silence between us stretched on for a moment. I heard Sarah's voice again, softer this time. Daniel, we're not asking you to be the same person you were before. We're asking you to be you, the one who built PulseOne, but without the weight of all that comes with it, a chance to start fresh. Start fresh. The words settled in my chest, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel that familiar pull toward perfection. I didn't feel the urge to prove anything to anyone. I thought about the young team I had met, about the way they had built something without the pressure of outside investors or a looming exit. It was different. It was real. Could I join them without becoming who I used to be? Without letting the dream consume me? Could I build again, but this time, with a clear mind and a clean slate? I'll need time to think about it, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. It's not an easy decision. Sarah paused for a moment. Take all the time you need, Daniel. We're in no rush. Just know that the door's open for you, whenever you're ready. I hung up the phone and sat back, my heart still racing. It was like I had just crossed some invisible line, a line I hadn't known existed. I could do it. I could take that first step again. But it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the exit. It wasn't about trying to prove anything to anyone. It was about doing it the right way. But the question still hung in the air, unanswered. Can I build again without becoming who I was? I said yes, but not the way they expected. Not the way anyone expected. When I called Sarah back a few days later, I wasn't ready to dive headfirst into another race. Another startup that would stretch me thin, chase growth, look for the next round of funding, push to scale faster than it could breathe. I had already seen that. I had already lived it. I knew what it felt like to build something that was supposed to change the world, only to realize that it was changing me in ways I couldn't control. So when I agreed to come on board, I set the terms. No outside investors, no venture capital, no chasing the next billion-dollar exit, no growing for the sake of growing. We'll build something that matters, I told them. But we do it our way, for the people who need it most, the small businesses, the schools, the nonprofits, the ones who can't afford to be part of the race. the ones who still want something real. Sarah and the team listened. They didn't balk at my conditions. They didn't push back. They didn't try to convince me otherwise. They were on the same page. They wanted something different too, something honest. We worked together, slowly at first, designing a platform that was simple, maybe even too simple for most people in the industry. We stripped away the unnecessary features. We removed the bloat, the upselling, the noise. What we were building wasn't flashy. It wasn't going to grab headlines. It wasn't going to make anyone a billionaire. But it was what people actually needed, a tool to help small teams, nonprofits, schools, and entrepreneurs connect, collaborate, organize their work without having to deal with the pressure of endless features and complexity. We created something minimalist, functional, and real, a tool that people could use every day without feeling overwhelmed by it. It wasn't perfect, it didn't need to be, but it worked, and it worked in a way that felt right. In the months that followed, we launched, quietly, no big announcements, no flashy marketing campaigns, just a soft release, a few pilot users, a small but dedicated group of people who understood what we were trying to do. And then came the messages. At first, it was just a few. Emails, short notes. Thank you for building this. It's making a huge difference in our small business. This is exactly what we needed for our school. Finally, something that isn't overcomplicated. We were going to give up on finding a tool that worked for our team, but your platform is exactly what we've been looking for. The messages kept coming. They weren't from investors or CEOs or venture capitalists. They were from teachers, from small business owners, from people who used our platform in their everyday lives. People who were grateful, people who understood what we had built, even if it wasn't the next big thing. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Real pride. The kind that doesn't come from a number on a balance sheet or a press release. The kind that comes from knowing you've done something that truly matters. I printed out a few of those emails, put them in a folder on my desk. Not to boast, not to remind myself of my success, but to remind myself of why I had said yes in the first place, of why I had come back to this. Not for the fame, not for the money, but for the people. For the ones who needed something simple, something honest. One morning as I sat at my desk reading another email, this one from a teacher in Vermont, thanking us for helping her organize her class projects more effectively, I realized something. I wasn't just building a product anymore. I was part of something that was helping people day in and day out, in a way I never had with PulseOne. And that's when I smiled. I smiled not because we had a product that worked, not because we were profitable, not because we were successful in the traditional sense, but because for the first time in my life, I knew that the work I was doing had meaning, that the choices I had made were mine, that I was building something that I could be proud of. Without the pressure, without the constant chase, I wasn't trying to change the world anymore. I was just trying to help the people who needed it most. And that for me was enough. It was more than enough. And when I looked at my reflection in the window that night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized I had finally found peace. This wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of something new, something I could live with, and I was okay with that. More than okay. It happened on a Thursday, just before noon. I was walking back from a quiet lunch, soup, bread, nothing special, when my phone buzzed, an unknown number. Bay Area code. I stood outside the cafe for a moment, letting the ocean breeze hit my face before answering. "Daniel Reed," a crisp voice asked. Too polished, too familiar. "Yes. This is Jordan Sims from Halcyon Capital. We've been following your new platform for a while now. Very clean, very promising. I wanted to reach out personally." I didn't say anything. I knew what was coming. I felt it in the tone, in the rhythm. I let him keep going. "We're interested in acquiring your company. Full buyout. Terms are flexible, but we're prepared to offer $75 million. 75. The number hung in the air like static. Not as shocking as the first time, but real. Very real. I stepped away from the door of the cafe, into the street. Cars passed, seagulls circled. Somewhere nearby, a kid was laughing. Daniel? I breathed in slowly. 75 million. It was almost poetic, almost the same number as before. Another call, another offer, another open hand, asking me to trade meaning for money? Except this time I wasn't running a company built for valuation. I wasn't chasing headlines or series rounds or exit velocity. I wasn't building for the boardroom. I was building for people, for teachers, for small teams that needed calm, not chaos. I was building for me. The voice on the line started again. We're open to conversations. Of course, we'd want to talk about roadmap, expansion, scaling potential. I stopped walking. Let me ask you something, I said, my voice calm, no edge, just quiet clarity. What would you do with it? If you bought it? A pause. Well, we'd streamline onboarding, push new integrations, repackage under a different brand probably, move up market, enterprise. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Of course, that's how it worked. Buy, grow, flip. It was the playbook, the same old rhythm. But this time, I didn't feel the panic. I didn't feel the pull. I felt something else. Stillness, control, a kind of peace I hadn't known before. He waited for an answer. I could feel him holding his breath on the other end of the line, expecting negotiation, or excitement, or at the very least, interest. But all I gave him was silence. And then, finally, the first exit cost me everything, I said, my voice low, steady, certain. This time, I knew exactly what I was keeping, and I hung up.